Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started with showing you some of the resources we've put together, and I'm going to share my screen, and this will be directly related to the process of unit planning for IB.
Okay, perfect.
And you should be able to see the website, and I shared this out earlier in the week. And what it is it's just a platform for housing links to various resources that will help you in the unit planning process. At the top, you'll see the subject guides. Your homework for the next week is to make sure you read your subject guide. And you can stop when you get to e-assessment.
Okay.
Which is found on page 50, but keep in mind a lot of this is open space and graphics, so it's not quite as long as it sounds.
Okay.
But it really does help you get to the point when you're thinking about unit planning. And it also helps you understand the IB structure that you'll see in the district.
Okay.
Once you start delving into the vocabulary and getting more familiar with the terms, you'll be more and more comfortable with unit planning.
Okay.
Here you start with the objectives for math. And if you notice, the objectives are not as detailed as our TEKS. And so that's good, because when we think about aligning them, it would have been much more complicated if they had given us really hard and fast, specific, broken down all the way down to the skills. But no, they're actually much broader, and they apply to most of what we are already doing at Judson. Really good stuff, and it also helps to guide you and remember that you're, number one, focusing on fostering all of those great skills within the learner profile, and number two, really helping the kids to grow in the approaches to learning, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Those skills that they need to leave us with. So you are year 3, MYP 3. MYP 2 is it's 7th grade, and MYP 1 is 6th grade.
Okay.
In the unit planner, which can be found on the website under additional resources, the template, those objectives will go right here.
Okay.
This is specifically laid out for IB objectives. And these are going to be tested. So they're related to the summative. That's why they sit right next to them.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
The approaches to learning. Let me pull up a graphic. This is the one we were ready to print, and then we went to at-home distance learning. But if you take a look, we're already doing so many of these. So if you think about the 4 C's that we learned about in all of our Team Time Wednesday meetings, it really is that and more, right? These approaches to learning will be in every lesson and unit in some capacity. And this website really does a good job of helping you understand and grasp the concepts. But again, it's best practices, and you're already doing so much of it. So that's the good news.
A lot of this feels kind of natural. Like when I was glancing over it, I'm like, okay, this is a lot of what we're already doing. It's just a different way of structuring it on paper, basically.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I did locate a term cheat sheet that I'm going to add to. Some of it is tailored for a different district. Like this here is referring to a high school that isn't LHS. But ultimately, most of it is pretty clear, and it helps us because a lot of times as admins, we try not to, but we leave people behind by saying things like ATL. It actually happens to me in admin meetings even, or teacher meetings, where someone will throw out an acronym and I won't remember what that stands for. But this guide, and we'll all collaborate around it, we can throw those terms in here and help each other really dive deep into understanding IB at a deeper level. We're also using GRASPs,
Mhm.
which is a structure for assessment,
Okay.
and that will go in your unit planner as well. That's district-wide, I believe.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about that as time goes on. We'll have specific professional development around the GRASPs, around the approaches to learning, the ATL skills that we looked at that are like the 4Cs, we already did our professional development around the learner profile, but we'll have posters in every room. And so all of this will become really common speak for students and teachers. That is the goal.
That would be wonderful because there's still, just being a first year teacher, there's so many acronyms that get thrown out that half the time I'm like, hey Siri, what's this mean? No.
Well, that's funny, right? It answered you. That's how much technology plays a part in our learning and lives now, isn't it? Well, and really as a veteran teacher, I feel the same way sometimes. So really it's partly because you're younger in your career, but it's also because things change often. And so it always helps to keep a list and be able to refer back to it. In addition to the resources here, you also have an annotated unit plan. And this one's really helpful when you're getting started because it outlines, it's coming up, it's loading. It outlines, once it's up, all of the portions of the unit planner. So it has all of this filled in with not examples necessarily, but an explanation of what might go there.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Yeah, and so that's good to know. Here's the annotated one.
Okay.
Now, let's go back to why I didn't provide a lot of examples. So I'm going to show you where you can find some examples that will apply to your subject or content area. But what we want to do is avoid. I don't want to write it for you or really rob you of the experience of the process of learning it.
Yeah. Well, it's just like for our students, we wouldn't want to give them all the answers either. Like, how can we expect our students to go off of this model if we can't even go through the same thing trying to plan it?
Exactly. That's the whole point behind it, is if you are spoon feeding your students, then you're robbing them of the opportunity to truly inquire and learn the concepts in the process. And since this is something that is here to stay, and a lot of programs come to districts and they go after a while and they're replaced with something better, but International Baccalaureate's not like that. It's here to stay. It's a huge investment. It's district-wide. It's a giant initiative, and it's not going anywhere. In fact, we already have it at 2 campuses and have for years. So this is definitely the new normal, and it is really important that we not rely on just one teammate or a coordinator, but instead all get well versed in this so that at really any point after a few years, anyone could step into the coordinator role and take the place of who's there now because we're all so good at it. That would be ultimately the goal. But this is a good tool. Another good tool is there's an ATL toolkit there. I won't go through all of it, but there's also guidance for global contexts and authentic assessments and inquiry questions. This section over here is not completed. I'm going to be working on that. So this is a work in progress, but this site is definitely getting there quicker. And under MYP support and examples, if you click math, which is your particular subject, and then you click how to use this, it'll take you right out onto the internet, onto an IB website that has a ton of resources. This will have examples for you.
Oh, wow.
It does not lay out examples for all of MYP3, and it certainly won't do the job for you because it's not Texas. In Texas, we have our TEKS, but it does give you examples and unit plans that you can look at and see exactly what it is that you need to put in a certain section. They're not all inclusive, and they're not even in order. So I'm looking at this. I found one that's MYP Year 3. That's what you are. I'm going to scroll down to unit plans. So this is very valuable. It's
Okay.
not as deep as we will be going, but it definitely is a skeleton. So you'll see that units can be anywhere from, I've seen 28 hours, I've seen 14. This one's a rather short one compared to some that I've seen. You'll space your units out with the testing calendar in mind first, and also with the natural breaks in your pacing guide. Meaning if you have units in your pacing guide that your instructional specialist has laid out, those are the units you'll use for unit planning. The goal for us is to have all of our first semester unit plans done by August. The reason that we upped the stakes on it is because now we know for sure we're not going back to a brick and mortar this year with our students. So we have more time to write, and we understand you have a personal life and you're dealing with your families and your students. So we're hoping between you and your teammates, that's a reasonable goal. But if at any point it becomes impossible, don't be afraid to reach out and talk to us, and we'll support you in any way we can. One of the things that you'll see in a unit plan that is specific to Texas, but not in these IB examples, is the TEKS. Since we have, or the TEKS, whatever you like to say, since we have objectives specific to Texas, I'm going to pull up an example that one of our teachers shared. This teacher's such a good sport because she does the work, she knows it isn't perfect, she shares it, and then she tweaks it. So this is a great example of not being exact, but also I can see her thought process for sure. I think it's very full. It doesn't have to be this full, but she likes that really clear detail. Up here in objectives, she has her IB objectives only. And then further down, in what would in the template be just content, she's adjusted her document to tailor to her specific content area and needs. And she's changed it to content standards, and then the student is expected to.
And that's where she's got her TEKS and everything.
She does. She has her TEKS there. She has laid them out. She's even created bookmarks to sections that she can go back and look with various resources, like the lists of the terminology she has to include. Okay, now again, this is very detailed. We do not expect you to be this detailed. She wrote this, I believe, before we had the adjustment come down that we do have to have daily lesson plans in addition to the unit planner. So in some ways that seems very daunting. But in other ways, it's a protection that we put in place for you guys so that, yes, you have your unit. Yes, we expect this to be done for the first semester by August, but your daily lesson plans will be hung with your unit planner behind it near the door. And at that point, when you're observed, or we do a walkthrough, or we come and look for the alignment in your lesson, we can pull that daily lesson, and there's no chance that we aren't seeing what's on that paper. Whereas in your unit planner, you might not be, there's not really enough space to be very specific. You see, she sort of gave it a good shot, but it gets muddled.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a daily lesson plan as you did every year, and you'll turn that in the shared drive with your unit planner. And they do need to be aligned. They I shouldn't say aligned because we use that interchangeably. They do need to match. So everything you're doing in your daily lesson plan needs to be somehow put into your unit plan in an abbreviated way. Okay. So if I walk in and notice that you're using Flipgrid, then I should be able to look somewhere on your unit planner and see somewhere that your students will have the TEK for presenting an idea or explaining, which would be a good verb to go with Flipgrid, right? Because it's a video tool where you respond.
Yeah.
Any questions around the daily lesson plan as opposed to the unit planner?
No, not really. That's pretty clear.
Pretty
and
clear, right?
like
Perfect.
very easy.
Okay, so this isn't completely on the mark. Like I said, she's a good sport. So there's certain terminology that you'll need to use, and she's going to adjust this here. But ultimately, she has really started off strong. Now, you'll want to defer to your particular instructional specialist or your team lead. It depends on the campus, your department head as to which sections you're going to use. We want to try and be as consistent as possible for our campus, but we know that there will be some sections that will be there for math that may not be there for science. Just know that there's certain elements you can find them on the, that's okay, you can find them on the template that have to be there. Don't eliminate anything that is there from IB. But you can add a section for technology or STEAM or hands-on learning, or journal entry, but you can't eliminate any of these items, any of these areas. They have to be there to meet the criteria for IB, okay?
That makes sense.
Yeah, just keep that in mind. I also found this handy guide and I tailored it for our needs. And it's a unit planning checklist, and I sent it out to you. It takes those criteria and it boils them down to very simple graphics and terms. So key concepts, it lists them, and it says choose one. Related concepts, you find your subject, and it says choose one or two.
Yeah, I kind of glanced at that email that had this attached to it.
Yeah, and it's super helpful because it's hard for me to keep track, and I'm supposed to be the expert. By the way, I'm no expert, so I'll be the first to admit it. But anytime you need help, I'm glad to help you find the answers. And this one is a good tool to help with unit planning. It also has these handy graphics with specific instructions. So if you get stuck in building the conceptual understanding, it helps you understand that concept. And then there's a formatting issue I need to fix, but it has some actual excerpts from the content subject guides too, which, I mean, it's directly from IB, so you can trust it. Okay. And then even it goes into inquiry questions and summative tasks.
Wow.
And then I found this graphic. I'm going to try to get it in a poster size for everyone or something like it. And it talks about those ATL skills.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far?
I don't have any so far. This has been pretty clear. Like it hasn't been hard to follow at all.
I'm going to add Kathy to our meeting. Hi, Ms. Rience. We're recording the meeting. I want to let you know that I'm going to provide a recording to you, and it's not a problem, and we'll put it on YouTube. So you're welcome to get off the call.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
Okay, don't worry. It happens. The beauty of this distance learning is now we know how to upload videos and share them. So it is really learning on the spot, right? What a great lesson.
Okay. Then I will watch it. I will watch it recorded. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Don't know how to get out, Vaughn.
I'll get you out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm not sure I know how to get her out either, but we'll keep her on there because I'm going to reshare my screen. And Kathy, you might be able to just close your window and that'll do it, or close the app. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'll show you a couple of the last pieces that we'll look at.
Oh, she got it.
She did perfect. And that is actually the interdisciplinary unit. So I want to pull up an example. Oh, I actually already did. The one with, let's go back to the one that the social studies teacher had started. If I can find it. Okay, so she's already starting with a sort of PBL format. When we're thinking about PBL, I want you to remember that we're going to be intercepting students with various social and emotional needs due to the current situation and the stay-at-home orders. So we want to start out pretty simple. You can take those great lessons you already have and you can put them into the unit planner, okay? You can shoot your unit planner my direction and I'll comment. Karen East, our IB consultant, has done some commenting on this. It's really helpful to be able to use the technology and we can collaborate in that way now and after when we're in our classrooms planning and in our data meetings and all those PLCs that we go to. But just remember in the beginning to start simple. Use those lessons you already have written out, put them into the unit planner. If you have 2 preps, you'll need to do unit planners for each of your preps. So let's say you taught a section of 6th and a section of 8th. You would need to either collaborate with the 6th grade team to get the unit planner and familiarize yourself and team plan around it, or you'd need to build a unit planner if it was only you, if you were an island, for each of your preps, okay?
Okay.
But remember, hers is very detailed. We have daily lesson plans now. That is the new charge. So with daily lesson plans, our unit plans rather, will be much more brief and simple. And our daily lesson plans will include the lesson cycle. For example, in your daily lesson plans, you might show your hook, your guided practice, your closure, your teak, your verb, which we'll talk about the alignment piece in a minute.
Okay.
But in your unit planner, you may not be able to get as specific.
Okay.
That's why Ms. Pondit wants us to have both. We must keep that alignment piece. Speaking of alignment, let's take a look at it. And how does it look in your unit planner? Well, up here, you're filling in the objectives, and they are actually from IB in your content, your subject guide, but the summative will be how you are assessing these objectives. All of this is related.
Mm-hmm.
Your ATL is all of those 4 C's and more skills, right? And then you get down here to the TEKS. So the TEKS are here, and you'll have your process of learning it. So you might have Flipgrid or whatever out here, and you'll have your lessons out here, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, but you're not going to break all those lessons down. And so that's why it's important to have that broken down into a daily lesson plan that an admin can easily access by the door when they walk in.
For the unit planner, do you recommend us for our daily lessons, like numbering them and then just putting in the unit planner daily lesson plan number this to make it clear?
That would be great. No one's asked that question. I think that's a great solution, referencing it in here. And if you're tech savvy, you can even link it in here.
Yeah, that would be good.
I do think that all of them need to be in your drive under shared drives in your Judson lesson plans.
Okay.
Okay, in your content specific and grade specific folder. So let's go back to the template. We're almost done, but just know here is where your TEKS go. So if your TEK over here has the word analyze in it, then your learning process for that needs to be aligned with that verb.
Okay.
So we should be able to see, let's say, for example, your TEK is 8.5B. And over here, you have a skill a learning process that represents the verb analyze that happens to be in that TEK. it's helpful to, since this becomes a list, to
Yeah.
put the TEAC over here. You don't have to spell it out. You can just put 8.5B or whatever it is that we said. Over here, you spell it out.
Oh, okay. So in the actual like section on the side, we don't have to like completely detail it, but then in the content, we can actually detail it and have it all there like to a T.
Correct. And you might you might want to try different things. Like I'd heard someone recommend color coding it. So if it's red over here and it's red over here, we know that we can break it down and make sure that it is actually aligned
Okay.
and represented in an appropriate way in regards to the verb, right?
Yeah, that makes
Is the learning activity actually the students analyzing, or do we need to upper game a bit there to create better alignment and target that instruction? Okay, that being said, I do want to make sure that everyone knows that the alignment is something that Longview ISD does very well. So what we want to avoid is doing anything under IB that derails what we do well, meaning everything that's great about your lesson plans already, all of those strategies that you're using, the hook, the guided practice, the closure, the TEAC, the verb, unpacking them, team planning, PLC, all of that will stay. This is the new template. This is the new format for representing our already best practices that we're using. And then in addition, we're building out to add the ATL, which we were already doing. We're just calling it something different and making sure to track it. Students track their approaches to learning skills and creating very specific inquiry questions.
Okay.
And then all of the other wonderful things that IB sets up. So we're not taking away from our wonderful things we do in Longview, we're adding more wonderful things. One other thing is under IB, you must have an interdisciplinary unit, meaning you must integrate 2 other content areas under IB with 1 unit per year. At Judson, we're doing at least 2, so 1 per semester, somewhere in the middle of the semester, okay, where it naturally falls,
Okay.
where it can be, where it can get the appropriate amount of focus. So the very beginning of the year, start simple, and then, you know, that cross-curricular lesson unit that needs to be somewhere in the middle of each semester, with the idea that you might have a parent night and present it. And in that unit, that interdisciplinary unit, you're integrating 2 other subjects and collaborating with those teams. So in math or algebra, you might partner with design, and the design teacher might represent something in math in her gaming design class. You might partner with drama, and drama might represent something in history that represents something you've discussed in math.
Well,
Some
actually,
of them are better than others. You might work, I'm sorry?
I said I was actually talking to one of our English teachers, and we were saying how it'd be really cool to do a lesson over when they're talking about like metaphors and similes and poetry. I was like, okay, well, we could take the nursery rhyme, you know, Ring Around the Rosie, and we could tie that into history with the bubonic plague, which could give us scientific notation and unit rate.
That's right. So kids don't know that's what that's about, and suddenly that becomes cool again, right? So yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up that it's relevant. It's also topical. It's a current event. It's real world application. So all of those elements are going to make this learning truly personalized for our students. And that fits under STEAM, that fits under IB, and best practices all together. So you're hitting the mark for sure. Any questions about the interdisciplinary projects?
No, ma'am. I don't have any right now.
Okay, great. Well, I am good if you are good. If you have any questions, shoot them my direction.
Okay.
And we're good to go. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.